The American economy shed 23,000 jobs in July, and Wall Street celebrated by setting new records anyway. I am Lambert Woollingham, and this is the Daily Shear for Saturday, August the 8th. I write these words at the ungodly hour producers call morning, which is the closest thing to sacrifice this job requires. Let us start close to home, where a defunct golf course provided today's most expensive lesson in corporate governance. Fort Worth City Council member Michael Crane saw his lawsuit against former business partner Will Northern thrown out by Texas business court judge Jerry Bullard, just ahead of a scheduled jury trial. Crane had accused Northern of misusing their real estate firm's confidential resources to seize a deal on the old Woodhaven Country Club, 150 acres Northern picked up at foreclosure after the golf course folded during the pandemic. Judge Bullard ruled that Crane held no ownership stake in Northern Crane Realty by the time he filed suit, which rather undercuts the premise of suing over it. The ruling also orders Crane to sell his remaining interest back to Northern under a Texas shootout clause and to cover the legal fees himself. Crane, who had abstained from a council zoning vote on the property citing his financial ties, says he will appeal, while Northern presses ahead with plans to turn the old course into a sprawling residential development. Austin Independent School District, continuing its retreat from a transportation plan nobody asked for, has scrapped its middle school bus hub model and gone back to neighborhood stops. The district had eliminated 27 bus routes to save $5.2 million as part of a broader $205 million budget cut, herding secondary students into centralized pickup points at libraries and fire stations. The plan came apart once finalized assignments showed some students facing 3-mile walks along high-speed roads just to reach those hubs. Facing threats of a mass exodus to charter schools, the district will fund the restored routes using savings from closing Paredes Middle School, while high schoolers stay on the hub system. Officials still insist will save time. Transportation Director Chris Hafeizadeh says the finalized middle school routes will be published by August 13th. Dallas County Commissioners approved a $15,000 settlement to close out a 3-year lawsuit over the 2022 death of Shamond Lewis, a 24-year-old with paranoid schizophrenia who died 6 days after a violent altercation with detention guards inside the Lou Sterrett Justice Center. Lewis had refused to change into a jail uniform. Security footage shows guards walking him into a changing room and rolling him out 12 minutes later strapped into a restraint chair, though no camera caught what happened in between. A fellow officer told investigators he saw a colleague pin Lewis face down and step on his legs like a surfboard while he screamed. An appeals court had already ruled the accused officer would be shielded by qualified immunity even if she caused his death, leaving the county largely untouchable. Unable to afford an appeal to the Supreme Court, Lewis's mother accepted the settlement, saying the sheriff's department evaded any real accountability. Texas Department of Public Safety troopers ran an immigration enforcement operation just outside Austin City Hall on Thursday, arresting 3 undocumented construction workers during a traffic stop at Cesar Chavez and Guadalupe. The troopers, deputized as federal designated immigration officers, pulled the vehicle over after the driver went the wrong way down a one-way street, then called in immigration and customs enforcement once they determined the passengers lacked legal status. News of the arrests reached the council chambers yards away, where members were mid-hearing on the city budget, and public comment quickly turned into condemnation of the timing. Council members Jose Velasquez, Zoran Kadri, and Vanessa Fuentes issued a joint statement vowing the city will keep standing by undocumented residents despite the state's enforcement push. into the economy, where the nation's largest mortgage lender spent the week finding out what an overhedged bet feels like at scale. The Senate passed a sweeping sanctions package against Russia and Iran by a lopsided 86-11 vote, giving the president authority to impose 100% tariffs on the top 5 buyers of Russian oil and gas. The bill, pushed for years by the late Senator Lindsey Graham, before his death in July, targets the export revenue funding Vladimir Putin's war, aiming squarely at China and India while carving out exceptions for countries demonstrably cutting back. Beyond the tariffs, it adds fresh sanctions on Russian officials, financial institutions, allied oligarchs, and the shadow fleet of tankers dodging price caps, and extends the existing embargo on Iran's energy and weapons sectors. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky showed up on Capitol Hill to celebrate the vote, though the bill still has to survive a House that is not thrilled about handing the executive branch that much unilateral tariff power. The Bureau of Labor Statistics reported that US employers cut 23,000 jobs in July, a stark miss against forecasts calling for 83,000 added, and then revised May and June downward by a combined 103,000 for good measure. Local public education alone shed nearly 50,000 roles. Leisure and hospitality lost 26,000 more, and the 3-month private hiring average sank to a sluggish 40,000. The unemployment rate ticked down to 4.1%, but only because more than 264,000 people gave up looking for work entirely. Wage growth slowed to 3.2% annually, trailing inflation running at 3.5%, so workers are losing ground in real terms. None of that stopped equity markets from notching record highs on the theory that a weak enough economy might finally get the Federal Reserve to back off rate hikes. The Trump administration formally notified Federal Reserve Governor Lisa Cook that it intends to remove her, with White House aide Dan Scavino sending a letter giving her until August 26th to contest it. The move threads a narrow needle left open by a 5-4 Supreme Court ruling in June, which let Cook keep her seat while she fights the case, but noted the president was free to try firing her again with proper notice. The underlying accusation from Federal Housing Finance Agency Director Bill Polt is that Cook claimed 2 separate properties in Michigan and Georgia as her primary residence to secure better loan terms. Cook's lawyers say she has lived at her Ann Arbor property since 2005 and call the campaign a manufactured pretext, while Cook herself says the real motive is punishing her for refusing to bend on interest rate policy. I will note, as someone with strong feelings about artificially cheap money, that firing your way to a friendlier vote is a hell of a monetary strategy. German energy company RWE agreed to pay the Trump administration $1.22 billion just to walk away from 3 offshore wind leases off New York, California, and Louisiana. The company concluded there was no realistic path to permits under an administration devoted to fossil fuels, surrendering leases that could have powered roughly 5 million homes by the early 2030s. RWE is redirecting that capital into conventional gas, buying a 16% stake in a Louisiana liquefied natural gas project for $900 million, and spending another $300 million on gas turbines for a pipeline network. This is the 5th such buyout this year, bringing the federal government's total spent unwinding offshore wind contracts to nearly $4 billion. Shares of UWM Holdings, parent of United Wholesale Mortgage and the largest home loan originator in the country, crashed into penny stock territory after the company disclosed a $603 million derivatives loss and suspended its dividend. CEO Matt Ishbia admitted The firm was heavily overhedged against an acquisition of Two Harbors Investment Corp that fell through, leaving the hedge exposed when bond markets moved the wrong way. The details appropriately come to us via Wolf Street, a name I will never tire of. The resulting $452 million quarterly loss forced an emergency $2.05 billion equity infusion from Oaktree Capital and the Ishbia family just to keep the lender solvent, a rescue expected to dilute existing shareholders by more than half. UWM has now lost 91% of its value since going public in January 2021 through the largest SPAC merger in Wall Street history, a deal that once valued the company at $16 billion. The supply of new single-family homes swelled to 9.3 months' worth of inventory, forcing the biggest builders to lean hard on price cuts to keep sales moving. Lenna's average sale price fell from $389,000 to $371,000 over the past year, with mortgage rate buydowns and closing cost help eating up nearly 13% of each transaction. D.R. Horton posted an average closing price of $362,000 for its fiscal third quarter, leaning on the same kind of affordability sweeteners. Unlike ordinary homeowners sitting on low fixed mortgage rates, the big builders have the balance sheets to buy down borrowing costs themselves, which let both companies post modest gains in unit deliveries even as the broader market stays frozen. On to the wider world, where a federal court decided the White House needs permission before it can redecorate. A federal appeals court ordered the Trump administration to stop above-ground construction on its $400 million, 90,000 square foot White House ballroom, ruling 2-1 that the executive branch cannot unilaterally reshape the property. The D.C. Circuit upheld an injunction won by the National Trust for Historic Preservation, with the majority noting that a president is a temporary tenant of the White House, not its owner, and cannot bypass Congress to fund a steel and concrete addition. Construction crews had already demolished the historic East Wing entirely and finished the underground foundation work before this ruling arrived. The court gave the Justice Department a 14-day window to seek emergency relief from the Supreme Court, and the president called the ruling a politically motivated attack on what he described as an essential national security facility, vowing to keep the September 2028 completion date intact. The Senate, continuing its habit of narrowly avoiding self-inflicted crises, passed a stopgap funding bill 90-6 overnight to keep the government running through December 11th, well ahead of the September 30th deadline and safely clear of the November midterms. The measure holds spending roughly flat across agencies while blocking a $1 billion White House request for design work on a proposed Trump-class battleship, and it leaves out any extra money for immigration and customs enforcement, keeping that agency's funding frozen at current levels through the rest of the term. The bill now heads to the House, where members are expected to reconcile the remaining details once they are back from recess. The Senate confirmed Todd Blanche as the 88th Attorney General in a 50-49 vote, elevating the president's former personal defense lawyer to run the Justice Department after Republican Senator Bill Cassidy delivered the deciding vote following private assurances about the department's independence. Republican Senators Lisa Murkowski and Susan Collins crossed over to vote with a united Democratic caucus against him, citing his role coordinating the administration's legal strategy. Since taking the acting role in April, Blanche built a $2 billion anti-weaponization compensation fund and granted the president's family broad Internal Revenue Service audit immunity before dismantling the fund to smooth his own confirmation. He now completes a rather tidy career arc from defending the president against federal prosecution to running federal prosecution himself. Senate Democrats voted unanimously to strip a national voter identification mandate out of the broader Save America Act during an overnight session, killing an amendment from Republican Senator John Husted that would have required a photo ID such as a driver's license, passport, or tribal card to receive a federal ballot. Republicans forced the vote specifically to put Chuck Schumer on record after his past statements supporting some form of voter ID, and Schumer called the maneuver partisan theater while insisting his caucus opposes only the more restrictive versions. Identification is already required to vote in 36 states, though 13 of those accept non-photo documents like utility bills or bank statements. The vote leaves federal election rules exactly where they were heading into the midterms. Illinois authorities found the decomposing remains of 56 people stored without refrigeration inside a South Side Chicago funeral home after neighbors' repeated complaints about the smell finally brought in inspectors. The Cook County Medical Examiner's Office and state regulators found the South Chicago chapel overrun with maggots and rodents, and the state immediately suspended the license of funeral director Johanna Morgan over conditions officials called an imminent public health danger. Records show the facility is run by a couple who previously operated a crematory that was shut down for similar failures in handling remains. Forensic pathologists now face a multi-day process identifying the bodies and matching them to death certificates, while Chicago police say detectives have opened a full investigation, though no charges have been filed yet. I keep returning to the detail that the stopgap bill specifically blocked funding for something called a Trump-class battleship, a ship that does not exist, will not exist for years, and was apparently named before a single rivet got ordered. Somewhere in the Pentagon, there is a folder, possibly a binder, with renderings of a hull, a bow, and a small brass plaque near the helm. I assume there is already a design memo debating a companion vessel, the Melania-class frigate, quietly tabled for a future Congress. I do not know what a Trump-class battleship does that a regular battleship could not, but I do know a naval architect somewhere just got told to put down a very expensive pencil. UWM stock now sits 91% below the valuation it carried when it went public through the largest SPAC merger in Wall Street history, a distinction the company will not be putting on a billboard anytime soon. That is the tally, and I am going to go check whether my own fleece has any structural liabilities Ripcorp should know about. Lambert Woollingham, done for the morning. The day has been shorn. Until tomorrow.